lastly, when you're doing lead gen, how do you make sure you're part of the ongoing business? Lastly, when you're doing lead gen, how do you make sure you're part of ongoing business the client gets? I'm not sure I understand that. How do you make sure you're part of ongoing business the client gets? I'm not sure I understand that. If you're here, Luca, and you want to reword that, I'm just not following the question. Seems really hard to be tracking everything, or is there some trust involved for them to report closed sales to you? Okay, I think I understand now. That second part of the question provided some more context. Okay, so it depends on how you monetize your lead gen, guys. How do you monetize your leads, right? Are you selling on a paper? Are you doing a rank and rent where you're leasing the site? Because that's a flat fee. That's the easiest way to manage stuff, guys. Hands down, that's the easiest way to manage stuff for lead gen business, right? You just rank an asset. Once it starts producing, you lease it out for a flat monthly fee. End of story. You have nothing to track there, right? I mean, you still have to make sure that the asset is producing, but you have nothing to track except make sure that you're getting getting paid on a monthly basis. It's the easiest way to do it. The next way would be pay per lead, right? So pay per lead is they get charged a certain amount per lead, per qualified lead. Well, what constitutes a qualified lead? Well, if it's phone calls that you're selling, it could be phone calls and form fills, right? And so if let's just go with phone calls, for example. If it's phone calls, you could say any call that's over 45 seconds long is a qualified call. And if you're using tracking phone numbers, which you would have to do if you're selling pay per lead or pay per call, then you would be able to go check the analytics for the phone calls through that number, and you'd be able to determine which calls what the duration of each call was, right? And in a lot of those phone tracking services, you can even enable recording. I don't, but you could technically listen to all the calls if you wanted, or hire somebody and have them listen to all of them. Again, I don't mess with that. For on pay per call, when I used to send calls directly to lead buyers, contractors essentially, because that's all I work with. When I used to send calls directly to them, there would be a threshold, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever. And if they stayed on the phone that long, that was a chargeable call, period. End of story. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That was a chargeable call. If it was less than, whatever that threshold was that we agreed on, and it depends on what their sales kind of like, whoever's buying the leads from you, it depends on like what their typical process is for taking lead information, if that makes sense. So in other words, different industries are going to have different call lengths to determine what makes it a qualified billable call, or what qualifies it as a billable call, I should say. For tree guys, a lot of times we would just settle on, 45 seconds. If it was 45 seconds or longer, that was enough time for them to get the lead information, to answer questions from the customer. If it was under 45 seconds, it was most likely a solicitation call. It was a spam call. So they were just, they were the contractor, the tree contractor would just hang up on them, or, get off the phone, and it would be before 45 seconds generally. Right. So that's the way to do it. But the way that I do pay per lead is, and I started this in 2013, was I use a answering service. So it's a 24-hour day, 7-day a week, 365-day a year. I use answerconnect.com. I've been using them since 2013, but I send all of my calls from every one of my lead gen assets goes into a call center. The call center answers the phone. That way there is no dispute. First of all, all of the solicitation calls get screened out by the call center. Does that make sense? If you're doing lead gen, guys, you're going to find out that, a lot of the calls that come through your assets are spam calls. There's solicitation calls from marketing agencies and people, from India telling you that they're Google representatives and that they can get you to first page of Google, and all these shitty calls that come through. You'll see that if you're generating calls directly and you're sending them to a contractor or a lead buyer, you'll find out that it pisses them off how many solicitation calls they get, how many spam calls they get. And so I found it was way better to go ahead and hire an answering service, and I direct every single call that comes through any one of my assets to a call center. The call center screens the calls. The contractor only gets notified of a lead when it's a valid lead and all of the information has been collected by the answering service. And then the contractor gets a text message and an email with the lead information. And then they call the customer back, right? The contractor, once they receive the lead information, they call the customer back to schedule the estimate. That's the way that I've been doing it since 2013. And it's been great because my contractors like that, because they don't get bothered with answering the phone from sales calls, from spammers, right? And other SEOs and everything else. They only get notified when a valid lead information has been collected, right? And so that every one of the leads, every time they get notified, that's a billable lead for me, because it's a pre-screened lead because I use an answering service. But if you're going to send them directly to a service provider or a lead buyer, then just know that, you know, there are thresholds that you can set. Again, it's going to vary by industry, but 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60 seconds, those are typical kind of thresholds. Any call duration above that is a billable call. Any call duration under that is not a billable call. And then lastly, the third way that I monetize assets, which I do with several contractors, is what's called revenue share model. And that is where I get 10% of any job that is closed. So they're only paying for jobs that leads. They're only paying for leads that they got a job from, that they earned revenue from, right? And that does require a level of trust. So that's something that I don't offer contractors right out of the gate. Like we have to establish a good working relationship. Well, what is a good working relationship? Communication is good between us, and they've paid me on time for purchasing leads, because we usually start on a pay per lead model. And then after, 2 or 3 months where they've paid me consistently for the leads that have been generated, and communication has been good throughout those 2 to 3 months, then I might offer to them, hey, here's an alternative way that we can do business together. We can do a revenue share model, which is where I will still continue to send you leads, but you don't pay for any of the leads except until and unless you close the lead into you close a job, and then I get 10% of that. And of course, whatever sort of payment or compensation arrangement you make on a revenue share model is going to vary by industry as well. In the tree service industry, I get 10% of whatever the contract price was. So if it's a $4,000 tree removal job, I get $400. If it's a $150 tree trimming job, I get $15. Does that make sense? So that's kind of how I've been doing it with contractors that I've established a relationship with. And then there's also additional things that you can do to kind of track that a little bit more. Like I use High Level as my kind of CRM and my marketing automation, app and all that stuff. And so for every lead gen asset that I have, under that sort of an arrangement with my contractor or my lead buyer, which is a revenue share model, they are forced to use my Tree Care HQ app, is what I call it, which is basically just High Level. It's a sub account that I create in High Level that it tracks all of their leads. And it goes, like, each lead that comes in goes into a pipeline. There's 5 stages in the pipeline, and that lead goes through the pipeline based upon what the contractor is doing with the lead. And when it goes to job close, then it notifies me that they owe me money. And I do that because it keeps track of all of the leads, and I can very easily go back and confirm whether they're cheating me or not on, lying and saying that they weren't closing jobs when they were, because all the contact information and everything is all kept within the CRM, which is a sub account on High Level, right? And so I force the Tree Care HQ app, again, that's what I call it, onto any contractors that are buying leads from me on the equity or the revenue share model. Because that I tell them, like, hey, look, this is another option. We can do it this way. Revenue share, I get 10% of every job that you close. You're only paying for leads that turned into revenue for you. However, in order to do so, you must use my app, and it's going to cost $100 a month to use my app. That's the only thing you got to pay, $100 a month, and then you only pay for leads. And that way I get revenue from my app, and also I get to track everything. Does that make sense? I've kind of developed a process for that. And by the way, I teach that same process, guys, in the mastermind. So what I just talked about, using High Level and everything else, all of that I've already taught in the mastermind, and I'm happy to teach about it again if you want to learn how to kind of build these sort of automations into your business for lead gen. That's what I do, and I teach that. Okay. But yeah, you don't want to do revenue share models, guys, unless you have developed or established a good relationship. There has to be a level of trust, and you still have to verify. Trust but verify. You still need to do that, guys. I've had tree contractors in the past that, I always thought it was the funniest thing to have the dumbest thing for somebody to be on that kind of an arrangement, right? Where they're only paying for leads that made them money, and for them to lie and cheat and say that they weren't closing jobs when they were. Because that's like killing the goose that lays the golden egg. Does that make sense? It's like, why would you ever screw that up? And I've had a bunch, probably less than 10, but more than 5. I've had more than 5 contractors over the years that have that I've caught lying to me, which is essentially stealing, by telling me that they weren't closing jobs. And then I verified or confirmed that they indeed did close jobs that they told me they didn't close. And so I'd fire them. I'd tell them flat out, you're fired, man. And I'd go find somebody else. And to me, I always thought that was funny. Why would people do that? But there's a lot of people out there that try to get over on you. So that's why I said trust, but still verify. And I only offer that to contractors that I've established a relationship with. Okay. It's a good question, by the way.